Hello, welcome to Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Yinka Yetade. Coming up in the program, violent protests erupt at one of Kenya's largest refugee camps as displaced residents in Kakuma protest steep cuts in rations and slashed aid from the US and other donors. The country's refugee services reporting that at least one person has been killed and 2 police officers injured in the chaos. The death toll from unrest in Angola's capital rises to 22 people. Luanda plagued by widespread looting and clashes between protesters and police following a sharp rise in fuel prices. And hospitals in Abuja overwhelmed and patient care delayed as nurses walk off the job in a strike over wages and working conditions. We're going to start the program with a look at the situation in one of Kenya's largest refugee camps. On Monday, violent demonstrations erupted at Kakuma as displaced residents there protested steep cuts in food rations and slashed aid from the US and other donors. While casualty numbers remain unclear, the country's refugee services reported on Monday that one person had been killed and 2 police officers injured in the unrest. Kakuma, the country's second largest camp after Dadaab, shelters around 300,000 people, mostly from South Sudan, Somalia, Uganda and Burundi. Well, let's get an update from John Muyama, who is someone who founded a refugee media house at the camp. That's Youth Voices of Kakuma. John joins us on the phone. John, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks so much for being with us. Just tell us about the situation there right now. Are protests still going on?
Thank you so much. I'm John. The current situation happening in Kakuma, it's a result of the USAID fund cut down. WFP has come up with a system of categorizing families into 4 categories. So there is category 1, 2, 3, and 4. So category 1s are those households whereby people have no income at all, and maybe they have a disabled or a sick person in the family, you have school-going children, and you don't have any income, you don't have any business of any point. So those are category 1, really vulnerable families. And then category 2 are still the vulnerable families, but they don't have any sick person, they don't have any disabled in the family, and maybe they also don't have school-going children, but they still can survive from the hand to the mouth. So those are category 2. Now, category 3 are the ones that are working as incentive workers for the refugees, but they are earning an income, like a salary. You can see someone like a teacher. A teacher is receiving an incentive of $50 per month. So that means this family has someone who is earning. So those are category 3. And category 4 are the ones that are they have businesses, people running businesses. Some maybe have supermarkets, some have big shops. So those are under category 4. Now, WFP, after categorizing this, they come up with a system of only supporting category 1 and category 2, who are the really vulnerable families who have 0 income, so that they can be given a token of from $5 to $9, depending on how the family setup is. So those who have a sick person, school-going children, they receive $9 per month per person for their food. And those who don't, from category 2, they receive $5 per month per head.
Well, John, let's talk a little bit about your own personal story, because I know that you're a refugee at that camp yourself. Tell us about how you got there and how you're coping with the cuts.
I've been in Kakuma since 2011. That's 14 years down the line, since I fled back home in DRC Congo due to the conflicts happening in my country. And then I fled to Kakuma, and we were really welcomed by UNHCR. We feel safe, of course, in terms of security, protection. We are well safe. But now they provided us with shelter. But now things are escalating when it comes to now food, which has now brought the current conflict. So I founded the Youth Voices of Kakuma in 2017 after I realized I'm now a videographer. I am a filmmaker, graduated from Film Aid International. So I as a person who can tell stories, so I decided to bring on board fellow refugees filmmakers so that we could tell a positive story of refugees. Since when I was back home, I could only see how media could represent the refugees. Anyone you ask about the refugees, they see people are needy, they see children walking barefoot, they see women cooking on firewood. But when you come on the ground in the camp, there is life. You'll see people running businesses, you'll see people doing their daily life like any other. There are refugees who have hired host communities and paying them salaries. Yes, thank you.
Well, John, it's great to have you. Thank you so much for telling us about the situation at the camp at the moment, and really good luck with the next few weeks and months.
Thank you so much.
Well, as we've been mentioning, the cuts to aid have played a big role in pushing people to protest. There's fears over what sort of impact the slashes to funding could have after a recent study by the University of Oxford and Antwerp revealed that a 20% aid cut in Kakuma camp in 2023 triggered rising hunger, psychological distress, and disrupted local credit and pricing systems. Well, Olivier Sterck, an associate professor at the University of Oxford and at the University of Antwerp, was part of the research team behind the study. He joins us now from Belgium. Olivier, thank you so much for being with us. We've just spoken to John, who lives at that camp in Kakuma. You've already observed the impact that aid cuts can have on the camp. You observed those impacts in 2023. Tell us what you found in that study.
Yes, thank you and good evening, and thank you for welcoming me. So what we found was quite dramatic. What we did actually was to follow 622 households for a 1 year period between 2022 and 2023. And we interviewed all these households 10 times over a 1 year period to see how their consumption, their mental well-being, etc., is fluctuating depending on the shocks they face. And in the middle of the study, so we observed this 20% ration cut. So at that time, refugees were receiving $17 per person per month. So that's already very little. That's less than $1 per person per day. And that was reduced by 20% in the middle of our study. And so what we could see is basically the impact on household, on how they cope with the shocks. And what we find is that basically the percentage of households that ate one meal per day or less increased by 8 percentage points. So after the cut, 37% of households were eating only one meal or less per day. The value of what they consume also decreased by 10%. The calories that they consume decreased. Their expenditure decreased by 22%, etc. They not only ate less, but also they ate less diverse diet, which is, of course, not good for health. They reported worse sleep and worse economic well-being over time.
Well, those are already stark findings, what you found in that study in 2023. We have these cuts now coming from the US and the UK as they pull back their support. How is this next wave of cuts likely to affect how the camp functions and the lives of refugees there?
Yes, these cuts are much more dramatic. So as I said, we studied a ration cut from more or less $17 per person per day to $13 per person per day. Now we are talking about something much worse. Now people are surviving with something like $5, $6 per person per day. And from next month onwards, as John explained very well, there will be different categories of people, with some households that are categorized as the most vulnerable, surviving only with something like $8, $10 per person per day, and others surviving either on $5 per person per day or per month. Sorry, I'm saying per day, but it's per month. So you have to imagine living with $10 per month for one person just. So it's less $1 per person per day. That's very little, and so the impact on food security will be dramatic. Like you can imagine, people will be living with less than 1,500 calories per day or less than 1,000 calories per day, and so there will be food insecurity, but there will also be more like widespread impact. Like I've discussed with refugees today, again, in the camp, and they've said that there is rising insecurity in the camp because refugees are now resorting to theft, to violence, to try to feed their family. Also, there is growing tension with the host community, basically because no refugees don't have the money that they need to afford to pay for firewood and other goods that the host community is typically selling. And so they have
Olivia,
to
I'm
collect the
so sorry
firewood
to
themselves,
interrupt
which
you.
is
We
very
are
risky.
running out of time, and I do really just want to ask you the last question because it is an important one. What
Yes.
solutions do you see authorities being able to employ here to counter the fallout of the aid shortages? Just give us that very quickly.
Yes, maybe one last point, because it's related to that. One other risk is migration. People will not be able to survive in the camp, and they will move either back to their country of origin, which is very risky for them because we are talking about Sudan, South Sudan, Somalia, countries where there is a lot of violence, but also they might go further, which with impacts. And so what are the policy implications? But the main responsible for this situation, they are the donors. And so they should realize that humanitarian is not something that is optional, that is discretionary. They really need to prioritize humanitarian aid. I understand that budgets are stretched, but GDP worldwide, it has never been as high. Okay, so it's really a moral failure to reduce budgets, and even more so humanitarian aid, because that's people that are living really on less than $1 per day. So if they have to reduce budget, they need to reduce aid to middle-income countries who can support themselves and cope with the shock. Also for humanitarian organization and aid organization, they really need to prioritize the essential needs, which is food, water, sanitation, shelters, etc. And probably for a moment of time, hopefully short, disinvest from other programs that are less essential. And then for Kenya, probably something that is important is give the right to work and to move to refugees. Like living in the camps with so little money will be extremely difficult for refugees. And so many people will have to find options elsewhere, either within Kenya if they are given the right to work or to move, or elsewhere in the country of origin or elsewhere. And so it's really essential that this is done.
Olivier, thank you so much for joining us on Eye on Africa. It's great to get your insight today.
Thank you.
We're going to move on now. An update on the situation in Angola. The death toll from unrest that has been plaguing the capital, Luanda, has risen to 22 people. Since Monday, the city has been gripped by widespread looting and violent clashes between protesters and police. This latest wave of anger follows a strike by taxi drivers over a sharp rise in fuel prices pushed through earlier this month. 1 litre went from 300 to 400 kwanzas. That's roughly 33 to 43 cents. For millions in the oil-rich nation, the hike adds even more pressure to already soaring living costs. Next to Abuja, where nurses have downed their tools this Wednesday in a strike over wages and working conditions. The walkout has left hospitals overwhelmed and delayed patient care. It's now the latest blow to Nigeria's strained healthcare system as the country battles a deepening cost of living crisis. Well, that's it from all of us on the Eye on Africa team. Do stay tuned to France 24.